Hi, everybody. How's it going? It's good to see everyone. Sorry I didn't get to put up the, what do you call it? There's like the invitation for this that's supposed to go out and just slipped my mind. So sorry, yeah, but I'm glad to be here with you guys today. How's everybody doing? It's been a good week. I am trying to get ready for our All Saints Day / All Souls Day marathon. It's a lot of masses. It's a whole lot of masses. So we've got the All Saints Day, which is a holy day this year, coming up on Wednesday. But what I would love to hear from everybody is, what is your parish doing to get ready for All Saints Day? And actually, let me rewind. Is your parish doing a vigil mass for All Saints Day? The reason I ask is just because it's a little bit, it's a little bit weird, right? The vigil of All Saints Day is Halloween, right? All Hallows Eve. But I don't know about you, but I always feel kind of weird having mass on Halloween. Not like I'm anti-Halloween or anything. It's just like it interferes with trick or treat on the one hand, and on the other hand, there are a little bit of, creepy, weird people who want to come to mass on that day. So I don't know. Just be curious to hear if you have an All Saints Day vigil mass at your parish. Go ahead and put that in the comments. I'm actually thinking about doing ours a little bit early this year so that we can try to beat trick or treat, and maybe the sun will still be up. But I don't know. I don't know yet. We'll find that out. This is from Eloise. Hello from near London. Hello, Eloise. It's good to have you. It's good to have you. I assume you're talking about the London, right? The big one. But beautiful city. Beautiful, beautiful city. I don't know how anyone affords to live there anymore, but it's a really nice place. Yeah, but I know, so I'm talking about All Saints Day, so I know that the vigil for that is always a little bit weird. But the next day, so November the 2nd, is All Souls Day, where we pray for all the dead. And traditionally, we have 3 masses that are offered. And I've tried so many different things with people, trying to just give them an opportunity to where they can go to mass. Sometimes I've broken it up. So like we have a mass here, and then a mass later in the day, and then a mass in the evening. Trying to spread it out to get as many people as I could. And that has some success, but it has the downside of being a second holy day in a row. But the other thing I've done before, and what I'm going to do this year, is offer 3 masses more or less back to back. So I know I'm going to start, I think at 11, and we'll have a mass. And then when that one's over, we'll have another mass at 11:30. And then when that one's over, we'll have a mass at noon. And yeah, that might be a little bit more challenging in terms of getting everybody to come. But people who have a little bit of free time and are willing to go to an optional mass, they might enjoy being able to go to multiple ones. I don't know, but yeah, it's beautiful. By the way, I love England. I haven't been back in a number of years. I got to go in 2017. It's the last time I was in England. I used to have a visa for the UK back in the day, but I don't anymore. But yeah, it was really neat. I get to visit the Anglicans who came into communion with the Catholic Church, and how they got to keep their books, and I lived with them for a little while. It was really cool. It was really, really cool. There's a lot of really cool little English customs that I didn't know. But the best one was the way that the pubs that are close to Parliament work, where they have those little bells like right above the wall and they ring. It's really great. So I love all that stuff though. Super cool, super cool. But honestly, I'm not one of these people who likes to go on and on and on about the romantic stuff. My actual favorite part of England, my actual favorite part of England is the train system, because it's beautiful, it's well done, and it made sense to me, and I'm all about it. I'm all about it. So anyway, yeah, so I love England. Great place. Good to have you here. So today, so instead of just talking about All Saints Day and stuff, I wanted to talk about these readings for this weekend. Now, I don't know if you've pulled it up. Let me find this, because I want to share it in the comments, just because I think it's good to have a reference, right? So let's pull this up. For the 30th Sunday of Ordinary Time, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it down here in these here comments. There we go. All right, it doesn't like, man, Facebook is so weird. Let's figure this out. So I got to go on my own Facebook. Yeah. Get on my own Facebook. And then there we go. I can comment on my own video as it's going on. All right. So this weekend is the 30th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Now, I got to be honest. I think these readings are really challenging. I think they're really challenging, not because of what they say. I think they're really challenging because they're very straightforward. It's hard to get this stuff wrong. So let me just read you the gospel, and I'll tell you, you can see if you agree or not. And if you don't agree, that's totally fine. You won't hurt my feelings. Matthew 22:34-40 says, when the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a scholar of the law, tested him by asking, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" And he said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments." All right. So the reason that I say I find this gospel and the first readings related, but the reason I find this challenging is because there's really not a lot to say, right? Like, yeah, you have to love God first, and you have to love your neighbors yourself. If you manage to somehow, in spite of all the difficulty, manage to do that, you are in. Good job. I mean, it's hard to really go a lot deeper with these things. So I know, like, Bishop Barron goes really deep on the idea of what it is to be a Christian morality, and okay, yeah, great. I don't know that that's kind of where I'm at, but I guess the first thought that came to my mind as I was kind of going over these readings was, first off, why does God care about what people love so much? Right? Doesn't that strike you as a little bit odd? And here's what I mean, right? Like, God, he's got a lot going on his plate. He runs the whole universe for all eternity. So God is looking at the world, and he sees wars, he sees sins, he sees Mother Teresa type people out there doing all the good work, and he cares about whether or not I love video games and TV more than him. You know what I mean? It doesn't really feel kind of that feels a little bit weird. And I know, for example, Christopher Hitchens used to really attack religion, and he would say things like, well, why does an all-powerful transcendent God care about what normal people do? I mean, maybe I could see him caring about dictators and people trying to destroy the world, that kind of thing. Yeah, but why does God care about the things that normal, boring, small people love? Well, a couple things, right? The first is theological. The second is more normal, like on the ground. So theologically, why does God care about the things we love? Well, God cares about the things we love because God loves us so much. So it's not that God is finicky and nitpicking and really trying to drill down deep and find us making a mistake. It's because God loves us so much. Every single person, he loves us all so much that he actually cares about what's going on the inside. And that's very humbling. It's very humbling. So it's not so much that God just really was looking out to get me, and he's really sensitive. You know, some of these old devotional books would talk about that, like God getting offended by our sins. And sure, sin offends God, but God doesn't care about what we love because it offends him, right? God cares about what we love because he loves us. And then the other reason why the love is so important is on a real human level. If we don't build our lives with the right thing as the foundation, the whole thing's going to fall apart. So what do I mean by that? So like, imagine somebody loves race cars or trains, right? You really love these things. They're awesome. But you can't hold a job, your family's falling apart, your physical health isn't working. Is that love of trains and race cars actually making your life better? No, it actually looks like it's hurting you. I know a lot of people that I deal with as a priest who they get their loves wrong. The priority is wrong. So like in a marriage, this is controversial, so bear with me here. A lot of people don't realize in a marriage there's like a hierarchy of loves that's supposed to be there too. So on the top, we're supposed to love God first. So God trumps everything, including the other person. And then so it goes God, spouse, children, in that order. Now, a lot of people get all upset because they say, oh, you're saying I'm not supposed to love my kid. No, I am saying you're supposed to love your kid. I am absolutely saying you're supposed to love your kid. But I'm also saying that you're supposed to love your spouse even more, and you're supposed to love God even more than that, right? Now, in a marriage, if the loves are out of order, what happens? Conflict, right? Conflict, division, and damage is a result not of somebody being a jerk, but that's what happens when things aren't built right, right? If I build a building and I put a roof in the middle and nothing on top, right? It's not really going to hold up super well. If my loves aren't ordered in the right way, my life's going to fall apart, or I'm going to see division and damage in my life. So that's kind of why God cares about the loves. But even more so, there's something I used to say, and I don't know that I still think it. So if you have thoughts on this, you can put them in the comments. That's totally fair. But I remember reading these Gospels, and back when I was really, really new as a priest, I used to read this and I'd say, it's impossible to love other people if we don't love God right. So what I was just saying about kind of stacking the loves in your life, if they're not ordered right, it's impossible to love other people. You're going to fall apart. Well, I don't know that that's true. There's a lot of people who are very broken and messed up, but they still manage to love someone else in a way that's good. Now, it's not that there's no room for growth or no adjustment. Absolutely, right? There is. But they do still love. It's not absolutely impossible to love other people and not have God in the right place in the chain, right? But what happens when our love for other people is separated from our love of God? That's a good question. And do you know what the Desert Fathers teach about that? Because I learned this and I thought it was really cool. The Desert Fathers actually teach that when our love of other people is separated from our love of God, it's not that the love of other people is impossible. What we suffer from is a sin, and the sin is called despondency or sadness. I just want to say that again. When our love for other people is cut off from love for God, the result is not peace. The result is not virtue. The result is sadness and despondency. Now, let me drill down a little bit on that, because I know that is a strange thing to say, and it is not what most people are used to. So the 7 deadly sins, one of those 7 deadly sins is translated in English as sloth, or as we heard it in seminary as sloth. Whatever. Well, the sin is not a small furry animal that hangs upside down. Well, I wish it was, because that is a very cute little animal. But anyway, I hate this translation. hate this translation because when people hear sloth as a sin, the first thing they think of is laziness. That the sin is the sin of laziness, and it's not quite laziness. It's a sin of being so sad, of being so beat down that you no longer desire to love God or other people. So how does this look like? We can take the case of someone who's more, I don't want to say sensual because that sounds mean, but somebody who's, willing to do what they want to do to feel good. We'll put it that way. Somebody in that situation, when they struggle from this sin of despondency, this is where we find them falling into sins, right? Falling into addictions, falling into affairs, falling into general, just kind of being selfish, right? Drinking too much, all this stuff, right? It's this desire to make, I'm going to do what it takes to make the sadness go away, right? And we know that doesn't work because it only creates more sadness and it compacts. But there's another kind of person. And the other kind of person, when they're confronted with this sadness, and by the way, this sadness is not always a moral failure. I want to be very clear that it is possible sometimes that people have an event that happens in their life. Someone they love gets cancer, they lose a job, right? There's a natural disaster and their house gets blown down, right? It's not always a moral failure, but it could be. But the point is that all of these produce sadness. And now there's some people, when they're confronted with sadness, they're not quite willing to go have an affair, go become an alcoholic. Maybe that doesn't make them comfortable. They're not wired that way. So what do these people do? These people, when confronted with sadness, they respond with work. They respond with work and good work. Good work. So this is something you see for a lot of times in priests and religious. So you can have a priest who's lost a lot of fervor. He's lost a lot of the sense of faith, if not the faith itself. And so what does he do? Well, he knows that if he just hangs out at home and sits around as an alcoholic, that will not go well for him. So what does he do? Well, instead of praying, instead of fasting, instead of listening to God and other people, he's going to spend all of his energy on projects and socials and missions and going out and doing stuff. You ever met that kind of priest? He's always busy. He's busy. And they always tell you that, by the way. It's like a vegan. How do you know someone's a vegan? Don't worry. They'll tell you. How do you know a priest is busy? Don't worry. He'll tell you, because that's what they do. And I don't think they should, but it's what they do. Now, the problem with this busyness is not just that it's busy, right? And it's not really even just that it's a lack of prayer. It's that it's cut off from the love of God. And the best way that we can know when our activities are coming from this sense of busyness and not from real love is the end result. And I'm not talking about what you do, right? So if I'm going through this and I decide, well, you know what? I'm going to build a ramp for some poor people. I'm going to get some wood and we're going to put it up and they're going to be helped, right? Well, the end result of that work ideally is a ramp, obviously, right? But I'm talking about the internal end result of these things. So what am I talking about then? If you've ever spent all your time working and at the end you find yourself kind of bitter, kind of angry, a little bit jumpy, empty feeling, that's probably an indicator that your actions aren't proceeding from a genuine love of God and thus of our neighbor. And so what I want to challenge people is, if you find yourself in this situation where you feel like you're just running on a treadmill, trying to work and do good stuff and be productive and a decent person, but you still feel really empty and sad, this might be a good chance for you to get off that treadmill and learn how to create that harmony in your sense of love. That if God really is the source of my life or the source of my actions, then I should actually feel some peace when I do good works. I should also feel tired and want to go back and rest, not always go. So just a thought for this week, maybe a good examination of conscience of, is my love for God in the right place? And does it lead to a sense of love for other people? Or is the good stuff I do just kind of filling a void. Because if it is, it's not really helping anybody. So anyway, that's my thoughts for the readings this week. I mean, like I said, I think these are really hard readings. I wish I want to find a way to say this because scripture is always good. There's no scripture that's bad, obviously, right? But I think in terms of public use, like where we're using them at mass, there are times when I wish we didn't have just obvious stuff. Or if it was obvious, I wish that sometimes I could get up and say, yeah, we all need to do this more, and then sit down. Because it's not hard in understanding, it's hard in doing, right? But whatever. That's my thoughts. I see Justin here. Hi, Justin. It's good to see you again. I believe the governor was out your all's way yesterday. So look at you all being important. No, I really do. The governor did a good thing yesterday with he put up some high ground locations. So if there's flooding again, people have a place to go. You know, it's all very good. But I kind of smiled to see someone important out our way. Sorry, I'm trying to update. I need to post our Holy Day Mass schedule. So I am just writing that real quick. All right. So we are going to do a vigil mass, but we are doing it early. All right. Just 1 second, and I'll be right there. All good. Publish. Okay, we did it. All right, let's get into some questions. First is from Rhonda. Father Rob, is it possible to do confession on Zoom? No, I'm sorry. It is not possible. It's not possible to do. It's not possible to do the sacraments with virtually, right? So we can't do it on the phone. We can't do it on Zoom. It actually does have to be. It does have to be in person. But I would always want to, before we really even get into that, I do think we need to address something that a lot of people don't realize, and that is, if you haven't been to confession in a long time, it's really good to say something first. And no, I'm not saying I haven't been to confession in a long time. That's fine. You know, whatever. We could fix that. If your marriage is not right with the church, so if you are married outside the church or you're living with someone who is not your spouse, I'm actually not able to hear your confession until that's resolved. So if your marriage situation isn't right, it's probably good to let me know that first. Because if you go through a whole confession and we find out that you have a what's called a canonical impediment, I'm actually not able to absolve you, and we're going to have to do this a second time. So, just a general word for people going to confession, that if it's been a really long time or you've been away from the faith and you got married outside the Catholic Church, or you've moved in with someone who's not your spouse in a romantic way, then yeah, we will absolutely need to take care of that first. But I say that just as a blanket thing, because we've gotten so bad as Catholics about talking about that. But it's more about being honest and trying to help people and give them the tools that we need. So yeah, hope that helps though. Eloise, so where are we? So I am in Eastern Kentucky. So that's kind of the middle of nowhere. This is, well, not the middle of nowhere, but it's not very populated. And I would say that it's sort of a little bit different. And I'm sure anybody who's local here is way better about this than I am. But where we are is in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. So when the United States was a colony of England, this was Indian territory. And it was a place where English settlers were not allowed to live. And so what ended up happening was the people just started coming over the mountains. And this was the place where nonconformists, where people who had problems with the law, or people who just wanted to be left alone, moved in. And that part is very much still in the roots. It's still very much in the roots, but it's a beautiful area. A lot of really good people. I say it's middle of nowhere because it's hard to find on a map if you don't know where you're looking. But it is a really cool place, and it's definitely somewhere to come visit if you ever get a chance. But here, I'm going to get to your question real quick. Any special prayers or Bible extracts you'd recommend? I lost both my parents, my mother a long battle against cancer, my father a heart attack. I believe he was heartbroken. Yeah. That's really challenging. That's really, really challenging. So the one book that I recommend to a lot of people, because I just don't think it's something we talk about enough, and it's a challenging read, but I think if you power through it, there's a lot of good there, right? So what I would say is read the book of Job. Read the book of Job. And the reason I say to read the book of Job is because it kind of talks about how God responds to our suffering. So the basic thought, right, is that Job is a good person and God really lets him get punished. And all of Job's friends come up and they say, oh, what you need to do is you need to realize that you sinned and you did something wrong. And so that's why you're being punished. And Job said, but I didn't. But I didn't do something wrong. I didn't do something more wrong than anyone else. And his friends say, oh, see, you're not being honest with yourself. If you were honest with yourself, you would know that you are doing something wrong. And as soon as you say you're sorry, God, he's going to fix it. And Job says, no. And in fact, the whole story kind of gets to this point where God actually shows up and he just tells Job, where were you when I founded the world? Where were you when I counted out the number of the grains of sand or the stars in the sky or the water in the deeps, right? It's not to say like God isn't answering the question, but I feel like it really speaks to suffering and to sadness in a way that it's hard to do just by teaching, right? It really gets to the heart a little bit. So I really recommend reading the book of Job and really praying with it because it's challenging, but I think it's got a lot of heavy lifting in terms of suffering. William, yeah, middle of nowhere. Ouch. Yeah, I'm sorry. I feel like for a lot of people who are outside of this area, you kind of have to set them up like that, because if you look on a map and you try to find anywhere in Eastern Kentucky, anywhere, doesn't matter just where we live, if you try to find anywhere and you don't know where you're looking, it's going to be hard, right? Or those what do you call them? Those like electricity maps where they show the night sky and they've got all the different countries and where the lights are at night and all that. So what what happens there is you look at Pikeville or you look at Eastern Kentucky and it's all dark, right? But it's not the middle of nowhere for those of us who live here, because we know how it actually works. But I think for outsiders, that's kind of what we got. This is from Michael. Yeah. It's Mike Shoemaker. Yeah, you're exactly right. We passed nowhere a long time ago. Now, as I say this, I don't know if this makes me a hypocrite or nuanced. I'll let you guys decide, because, kind of both. Nuance is a nice way of saying hypocrite nowadays, but whatever. I remember when we had a new priest. He was ordained from our parish here, and he came as part of that tradition. He came and celebrated his first Mass at our parish. Now, if you don't know this, in the Roman Catholic Church, there's a lowercase t tradition, which means you don't have to do this. This could change. It doesn't matter. Well, it matters, but it doesn't hold obligation, we'll say, where you don't preach at your first Mass. And there's a good reason for that, and it's because you're thinking about celebrating your first Mass. There's a lot of moving parts and things that you aren't used to. And so maybe preaching is just one less thing you got to worry about. So what usually happens is the new priest will ask one of his friends or one of his mentors or one of his teachers to preach at that first Mass. I remember the rector of the seminary came and preached at this first Mass. And he God bless him. He had no idea what he was doing. He's not from here, so I don't fault him, but he got up and it still burned into my head. He walked up to the pulpit and he said, well, this isn't the end of the earth, but you can probably see it from here. And I thought, oh no, no. And the reason I thought that was just because, if you live in Pikeville, you kind of know that this is a place where people go to, right? It's not a place that's the end of the world. Like everybody who lives out in the county comes here for stuff, right? We have the prescription dog food, right? We have the cool, well, maybe not the nice restaurants. We have the restaurants, right? We have the stores. We've got the stuff. So I always want to tell people, if you live in this area, this is where it's at. This is where everybody's coming to. If you don't live in this area, it still kind of looks and feels like the end of the world, especially if you're driving from a big city. So yeah, it's not the middle of nowhere by any means in terms of the real on the ground thing, but it's hard to really communicate it. Eastern Kentucky's, it's just weird. It's kind of like a rural place, but it's also not, because the mountains make everything like difficult. You get why settlers saw them and were like, no, we're just gonna go back this other way, or they keep going and like, oh, there's this river here. We'll just go along the river. It's a little bit better. But yeah, for sure. Going to town. Yep. That is how it is. Unfortunately, I live in town, which sometimes is nice, but I don't know if you can hear it, but they're building all of the things ever, like right in my backyard. So I'm not, I like convenience, but I don't like what it costs because I want to be difficult. Rhonda, if you're divorced after marrying outside the church, does that matter? Well, if you're currently not living with somebody in that situation, then yeah, you're okay. You're okay. It's people who are actively living those marriages that are outside the church. But that's a good question. I think you bring up a really good point. Just because, we haven't done a good job explaining what we believe about marriage. And I feel bad because a lot of people think, the Catholic Church is just going after, let's say, LGBT or something like that. And, certainly we don't agree with that lifestyle, but our teaching on heterosexual marriage and who's, what it means and what it requires is actually quite challenging. And I don't think enough people really, well, I know they don't live it well enough, but I also think we don't understand it. And so that's all. I just want to make sure people understand a little bit of where the church is coming from. And also something that I wish I could tell like bishops this. I think a lot of, bishops will talk about like, well, you have to respect somebody's conscience. And absolutely we do. But I also kind of think that I have to respect my conscience as well, because I have a conscience. And I also made a promise, like a very, very serious promise, to uphold the teaching and practice of the Roman Catholic Church. And that's not a denominational promise, like, well, I am a Methodist and so I'll do Methodist stuff. Like for us Catholics, there's a very strong, very, very strong personal attachment to this church thing. So I just sometimes wish bishops would maybe look at it that other way, that priests have consciences too, and we have to do our best to try to uphold that. I don't know. Anyway, hope that helps. Hope that's a little bit of useful information. Hello, it's good to have you. It's Timui, right? Good to have you. Let me see here. Just making sure that I've got all my ducks in a row, and I do, surprisingly. I do. Oh, by the way, for anybody who's here at the parish, I fully apologize, but our Saturday, we got super unlucky for our Saturday Mass. It's happening. We are having Mass, so don't worry about that. But our musicians, all of them, have very just like unfortunate commitments. So they won't be here. So what does that mean? It means that you have to listen to me sing for our Saturday Vigil Mass. Why do I say this? Number one, I ask for your kindness because I don't really want to sing either, but something's better than nothing. And if you were on the fence about whether you're going to come to Saturday or Sunday or this weekend, maybe you go to Sunday. Maybe, I don't know. Just a thought. Just a thought. But anyway, just throwing that out there. You got a good question here. It said, is it good to live single forever? Well, I don't know. I will be honest. I remember when I was considering going into seminary, I remember there was a movement, let's say, where people would talk about all the different vocations in the church, right? They would say, you can be married, you can be a priest, you can go be a monk or a nun, and you can be single. And I always thought, I don't know that single on its own is a vocation that we really want to be promoting. And here's why. So what does it say in Genesis? In Genesis, it says, I want to say it's 2. Genesis 2. It says, it is not good for man to be alone. It's not good. Why is it not good? Well, it's not good because God made us for relationships and God made us for community, right? We are not supposed to be by ourselves. We're not psychologically made for that. We know this from science, right? Human beings have always lived in groups. We are not solo animals. That is not how we work. Why do you think dogs like us so much? Just biologically, right? No religion here. Why do dogs like us so much? Because like dogs, we are very much pack animals, and dogs just join the pack. That's why they get along with humans. You ever wonder why cats and humans, like we like each other, but we've got our distance? The reason is because cats are solitary animals and we aren't. And so cats like to follow us and they like to hang out with us, but it's not like a dog where they're like, oh, we're in, right? So I say that because, on the one hand, we have this theological case that men and women are created for relationship, that we're created for each other, that we need God, and we need each other to be happy and to be holy. And on the other hand, there's a very biological, right? The drive for relationship, the drive to reproduce, but also the fact that we are not solitary animals. So is it good? Maybe in an absolute sense, it's not really where we want someone to be. But maybe in a particular sense, it could be good for a person. So what do I mean by that? So let's say you have, I don't know. I can think of a good case. Let's say somebody's married and their spouse leaves them, and this person decides to stay single now. Right? They've been divorced, and the church teaches that they're not currently free to marry without an annulment, right? So is it good? Is it good for them to be single? Well, for that person in that situation, yeah, it could be good. But absolutely, like up in the sky, 40,000 feet up, is it good for people to be single? Well, it's not really the desired outcome. But in particular situations, it could be what we would say accidentally good, right? Good in this particular circumstance for this particular person. Yeah, it just depends, and that's why we have discernment, number one, on behalf of the person, but it's also why we have a church. We have an exterior church that tells us stuff. So when I go to confession, even as a priest, and the other priest tells me, hey man, you got to do this different. Now I know I got to do that differently because another person told me that. And so when you go to confession, or when you go to spiritual direction, or when you just talk to your pastor, whatever it is, that's a good that's a good little benchmark about what's good for you or good for any particular person. So yeah, hope that. Here we go. So I love God, I love my friend, and just only friends. Still no need any married, and still very happy myself. Is that okay? Yeah. That isn't wrong. It's not wrong in the slightest. It's definitely okay. There's nothing wrong with living your life in a way that does actually work for you, right? So one of the things I try to tell people, I don't know if anybody remembers the Baltimore Catechism, but the Baltimore Catechism talks about the vocation, right? That God calls people to be married or be a priest or whatever. And the question was always, what happens if somebody were to choose the wrong vocation? Let's say they were supposed to be married and they went and became a priest or something, right? Or the other way around. They're supposed to be a priest and they went and got married. Is it possible for that person to be saved? Yes. Yes. God can save us in any vocation as long as we live it out right. So it doesn't matter which one you choose. What matters is that you do it correctly, right? So being a priest, right? Can you be saved being a priest? Yes. Will you be saved by being a bad priest? No, right? Can you be saved by being married? Yes. Getting married outside the church or being unfaithful to your spouse or refusing to raise your children, will that make you saved? No, no, no. Any of the vocations done correctly and lived out fully will work for you. So I just say maybe don't worry about it. Be at peace, and I would just say, yeah, keep at it. And if it's not sinful, if it's not wrong, and it's working for you, then pay attention to that because that matters. Hope that helps. Real quick, Eloise, have to go now. Thanks very much. Well, it's good to have you. Good to have you. I hope that you become a regular for us. All right, we got one from David. Hi, David. It's good to see you. What can we tell small children in Mass when it's time for communion and they can't receive? What is an age-appropriate explanation for a 5-year-old? Yeah, great question. So I got to say, before I even answer this question, I have to put my own cards on the table. I got to say, I kind of find the Roman Church's teaching on children and communion, it's a little hard for me. I'm not saying I don't believe it. I'm not saying like, oh, it's dumb, but it's challenging, right? And it's challenging because number one, I look out at other apostolic churches, other churches with apostolic roots and bishops and valid sacraments and all that. And what do we see, for example, in the Orthodox churches, right? They give children communion as soon as they're baptized. Why? It's not just because we want to look and be like, well, we want to do everything they do because we don't want to be left out. No, there is a reason. And I think the reason is twofold. The first is from the mouth of the Lord himself, where Jesus said, let the little children come to me. Let the little children come to me. He didn't say, let them come to me when they're ready. He didn't say, let them come to me when they understand who I am and what I'm doing. They didn't know anything. They just knew they wanted to see him. And Jesus thought that was kind of good enough, right? But then the other thing's more sacramental. And I find it a little bit challenging because for us as Catholics, we teach that the Eucharist, that communion, is what it is, regardless of what anybody happens to believe about it. So if like the Pew Research study found, that if 2/3 of people in the pews believe that communion is just a symbol, it's still the body and blood of Jesus. Your lack of belief doesn't change the thing. So what does that mean? It means that a child's lack of understanding, a lack of refined belief, does not change what the Eucharist is. It doesn't change what communion is. So with those two things, I generally would be more okay with younger communions, but the church has asked us not to do that, and the church has leaned more on the being able to understand so that it will be fruitful, right? So what can you tell a small kid? What can you tell them? The best thing I know to tell them is not yet. Not yet. It's not no. We want you to receive communion. We want you to be able to receive Jesus and to meet Jesus and to live his life, right? We want to tell them that. Yeah, it's not no, you're bad, and it's not no, this isn't for kids. It's you're not ready yet. It's a not yet, not a no. So I kind of think about it like little kids, they do gymnastics, they do sports. I know gymnastics because that's what I know. But you take the little kids in and they see some of the bigger kids doing things on the rings and on the bars and doing the little flippy flips over on the high bars and all that. And they don't let the 5-year-olds up there quite yet. It's not that they don't ever want to get them there. It's not that they're never allowed to go on the high bar. It's just they're not ready yet. We are here to get you ready. So that's kind of my best thought. And I know it's miserable. And as a parent, I'm sure that telling a kid not yet is literally the same thing as saying no, absolutely not a chance. Because kids, they don't have that refinement to kind of separate those two. But I think if you can somehow communicate to them that we want you to receive communion, we just have to get you there when you're just a little bit older. You're saying a 5-year-old. The church says 7, so it's really not that far. And maybe what I would do is just kind of sit them down with a like we know on your 7th birthday and then this many weeks, that kind of thing. But one thing I do like about our parish here is that we have a more fluid program for sacramental prep. So when they reach their 7th birthday, or even as they're getting to their 7th birthday, so like if she's, let's say, 6.5, or when she turns 6, if we want to get on this early, we can start her on the whatever she needs to do to get prepared. But I would just say, just like you do with any other thing with a kid, try to distract them a little bit so as to point them in the right direction. But I know that's hard. But great question. MCRR, nice wall paintings. Looks like Demon Slayer. It is Demon Slayer, actually. Yeah, we've got. I can't do this backwards. We've got Nezuko over here, and in the middle is Shield Hero. And we got Splatoon up on top. So one of my favorite things to do is I love going to Comic Cons. I think they're fun. I'm a huge nerd. I like all that stuff, but I like being able to go. And one of my favorite things is actually being able to support kind of independent artists, because these guys, they only make their money by going to these shows, and they work really hard. And so when I find an artist that I think does a good job and it looks nice, I like to buy that stuff. And one of the things, especially as a priest in a rectory, rectories can be really, really stark, really, really stark. And I find that getting a place set up to where you feel like you want to be there, to where it feels kind of home, that's really good for ministry, because it means you don't want to leave all the time. So yeah, hope that helps. Is the bottom one from Fire Emblem? No, it's Kirito. It's Kirito from SAO, because I'm an animal. I don't really like that show too much. First season was okay, but I do like Kirito, and Hazuna's nice, but he's got like his sword. I actually have in my car. I've got a little dangly deal hanging from my rear view mirror. It's got all of Kirito's swords on it. That's awesome, of course. Right? Some people see it and they're like, oh, are these like the 3 archangels? And I'm like, yes, they are definitely not swords from a show. So yeah, I like all that stuff. I got a question real quick. This might be our last one, because I've got to go get set up for church and everything. It's from Joan. Hello, Father Rob. I was watching a documentary and they talked about the Anunnaki and the Surpak and the Great Flood. What are your thoughts about this? All right. My thoughts are that this stuff is not true. I know that's kind of sudden, but so one of the things that I try to remind people is something Thomas Aquinas taught about Catholics and truth, right? So Thomas said that Catholics have a responsibility not to embrace sort of, he wouldn't call them fringe ideas, but he would say things of doubtful truth, right? So he would say something like, we have to be really, really careful about embracing certain ideas because they make the church look silly. So my problem with the giants and all of the flood stuff is that it's pseudo-archaeology, right? This is not good science. It's not. And I was homeschooled in seminary, and they not in seminary, I was homeschooled in high school. And even my family and we all kind of thought this was goofy. They really tried to stuff it down our throats, and it's not scientific. There's no basis for it. There's a lot of fraud that's involved, a lot of fakery. And the problem I have is that ultimately I actually think that a lot of that science is pretty racist. So what they do is they find some of these mounds and they find artifacts, and they say, oh, obviously this is from ancient Israel. These are Jewish things. The reality is a lot of them are from Native Americans. right? They're from just normal people. So the problem is that, we're assuming, oh, well, these people are obviously not smart enough to do this. And you think, well, no, actually, they're quite smart. And so I look at it and I think, the Bible is not trying to present a full on, I don't know, a full on cosmology with giants and this and that and the flood. I think the point of the flood, John Paul II even said that this belongs to a properly mythological understanding. And what he means by that is not, oh, it's all goofy, right? What it means is we have to read Noah's flood in the line of what it's teaching in Genesis. And Genesis is not so much trying to give a history of the world, it's trying to give a history of sin. It's trying to give a history of sin. So what happens, the whole thrust of the narrative in Genesis is that men and women sin, right? And then the world gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, right? So Adam and Eve sin, and so we have murder happening for the first time, and then we have all these cities and all this bloodshed that starts happening, and eventually the flood is supposed to be this restarting of the world, but that doesn't really work either, does it? Because immediately after they get out of the ark, sin was also in that ark with them. And we see that through Ham, one of Noah's sons, which Genesis says is the precursor of some of the pagan nations like Egypt, right? So I really think that stuff is dangerous. I don't recommend it for Catholics. And I kind of think it makes us look silly in the eyes of the world. So I know that's a little bit strong, and I don't mean it against you. So please don't hear it that way. Just take my opinion with a grain of salt, but I really think I would caution against that sort of thing. For Rhonda, Father Rob, you're far from a nerd. You're one of the best priests ever up to date. Well, thanks, Rhonda. I'm glad you think so. I kind of think I'm pretty far gone down the nerd rabbit hole. It's from Josephine, following from Uganda. It is good to have you. Good to have you. I hope things are okay down there in Uganda. I know that with some of the weather you guys have been having, it's rough. It's really, really hot and dry. But prayers for you guys. Prayers for your country. Yeah, it's good to have you here. Well, I have to sign off here right now. I've got to go set up for Mass. Say a prayer for me. Like I said earlier, our musicians aren't coming. So I am going to do my best to sing the whole kit and caboodle. So we'll get through it. But if you live here and you were going to go to Mass for the vigil tonight, maybe go tomorrow. But you do whatever you want. Until then, I look forward to seeing you all next week. I look forward to it. You're good people. Thank you for your attention. Take care, and God bless you.